We've been here before. A true crime story gains traction, which then prompts massive media attention on it, that in turn leads to the true degeneracy of the internet flourishing, like a peacock's quills while trying to attract a mate. Jeffrey Dahmer. Gabby Petito.
So everybody stop scrolling and pay attention to this poster. There's a missing person named Gabby Petito.
Gypsy Rose Blanchard.
There's already been a shitload of discourse online about how she's a master manipulator, or she should have done this instead, or I would have done that flyer Z.
Johnny Depp and Amber Heard. Time and time again, a deeply complex situation that we are not intimately involved in gets projected online like a bat signal, leading to people giving their deeply disturbing and unsolicited opinions on the subject matter that are more black and white than the issue of anchovies on pizza. Yes. Of course, people can share their opinions online. That's what makes the internet so overwhelmingly enjoyable. But that doesn't mean that these people are free from criticism. The internet was a mistake. I've said it numerous times on this channel. We were not meant to have 24/7 access to every possible piece of information imaginable at our fingertips. Want to know what someone thinks about beans on toast? No, but they'll tell you it. Obviously in the most aggressive and borderline insane way that they possibly can. There is no peace in the world, literally, but also figuratively in this imaginary land that we've created in order to communicate our thoughts and feelings with each other instantly. What a great idea that was. Baby Reindeer is a Netflix original that has taken the world by storm, with over 22 million viewers tuning in as of the beginning of May. Not something I usually hear in the same sentence with the words Netflix original. Created by and starring Richard Gadd, Richard Gadd plays himself with the pseudonym of Donnie in the show about his life. Baby Reindeer is a story about stalking, assault, failure, masculinity, and the desire to be seen. With that being said, clearly there's a lot of dark and complex subject matter that's covered in the show. My question is, how will people online take this show and twist and warp it until it's almost unrecognizable? Very skillfully. We've done this before. Give me a whippet and 5 minutes and I could take anything you throw at me and find a way to make a Twitter post completely missing the point. Yep, just like that.
6 years on, what is masculinity? What does that really mean?
If you leave my family alone, I will hang your curtains tonight.
I find it quite obscene. I find it horrifying, misogynistic.
That guy in Baby Reindeer, I know that's a real story, but he is not a victim.
I think the girls with their nails done now.
Baby Reindeer opens with 5 simple words that have drastically Baby Reindeer opens with 5 simple words that have drastically changed the course of events following the release of the show. This is a true story. Most dramatic depictions of real-life events are usually prefaced with the 7-word phrase, "This is based on a true story." See, the "based on" adds 2 letters to the 5, making it 7 letters. I hope you enjoyed today's installment of Counting with Luke. Next up, retellings, even if they're based on something real, usually do not blatantly exclaim that they are entirely true, because even if you believe Richard Gadd was a victim, it would be pretty offensive to say otherwise in my opinion. People cannot perfectly recreate their life events down to the T. Our memories are hazy sometimes, and that is not me denying Richard Gadd's victimhood, it's simply a statement. On top of that, there is a very real possibility that events are chalked up to be more interesting than they really are for the sake of viewership on shows like this. Forensic psychologist Dr. Lorraine Sheardon says stalking is not always the cookie-cutter formula audiences are enthralled by. A lot of it, the media, is all killer, no filler. You don't get the more mundane aspects of stalking, you just get the really, really dramatic bits. That means it's often quite misrepresented because the everyday, boring, hideous, demeaning, fear-inducing, but ultimately kind of predictably miserable aspects of stalking does not make good TV. Although this is how the show first draws you in, Baby Reindeer does have an end credits disclaimer that says, "This program is based on real events. However, certain characters, names, incidents, locations, and dialogue have been fictionalized for dramatic purposes. So which one is it? Of course, I believe Richard Gadd to be a victim. Accusing victims of lying is mostly baseless since the majority of assault, stalking, and victims do not false report. However, Richard Gadd made an interesting statement to The Hollywood Reporter about people attempting to find the real alleged abusers from the show. I put out a statement publicly saying that I want the show to be received as a piece of art, and I want the show to be, sorry, I have to do it, and I want the people to enjoy it as a piece of art. I'm called Donnie Dunn. It exists in a sort of fictional realm. Even though it's based on the truth, it exists in a fictional realm. Let's enjoy the world that I've created. And I couldn't agree more. What he has given us is something that's special, in my opinion, and for it to receive the amount of attention that it has is incredible, especially from Netflix show. Unfortunately, people have took to treating the show as a documentary, going against Richard Gadd's wishes for how people should perceive the show. Towards the end of the show, we see Donnie's stalker Martha receive her sentencing in a public courtroom. Gadd suggested to the Times that his stalker did not go to prison, adding that he didn't want to throw someone who is that level of mentally unwell in prison. He also revealed that he had mixed feelings about it, but that the situation was now quote-unquote resolved. Again, I'm not accusing him of lying, but we have to look at things critically, and we have to accept that retellings are often dramatized in some ways. We will be getting into the shitstorm surrounding the way people online have reacted to the show, but first, I really want to dive into the show a bit more. Of course, all my sources are going to be linked down below, and I will be linking down some videos from other people with different perspectives, so that it's just not me talking about the show. Because you should listen to other people, not just me. Although listening to me is probably the most important thing you could do. As a note, when I'm speaking about the plot, I am referencing the fictional portrayals of Richard Gadd and his abusers, so as to not get sued. I have to say that. I do not have the money for that. Don't have the money for much of anything at all. Donnie is an aspiring comedian who is aspiring for a reason. There are a lot of things that are terrible that happen throughout this show. But by God, if I have to sit through another one of Donnie's stand-up sets, I will actually kill my... His comedy sets are meant to be extremely painful to watch. Donnie is, to put it nicely, kindly, a loser, a deadbeat. He feels like a failure. You know, I could go on and on. With his career never really taking off, he works at a bar and lives in his, get this, ex-girlfriend's mom's house. Well, if there's one thing worse than a man living in his mom's basement, it's that. Richard Gadd, to me, was quite honest about how much of a terrible person he was during this time in his life. Because while it doesn't happen to every victim, some victims will turn into the worst version of themselves in response to the trauma that they have experienced. Donnie definitely fell into this category. The first episode of Baby Reindeer opens with Donnie going to the police. When asked how long the stalking has been going on for, Donnie said 6 months. And when asked why it took him so long to report it, he is unable to respond. Okay, you know, victim blaming from the police. Nothing really new there. This is where Donnie's unattractive qualities are really highlighted. At multiple points during the show, he is shown baiting and even bathing in the attention that he receives from his stalker, Martha. This obsession with the attention that Martha gives him lasts until the final episode of the show, where he is shown listening to some of her many angry voicemails that she left for him. Although Martha is traumatizing him and making his life a living hell, he can't help but enjoy the attention a little bit. Stalking is horrific and terrifying, but for Donnie, it's also a way to receive the attention that he so desperately needs. When Donnie meets Martha at the bar that he works at, he takes pity on her and doesn't see how anything can come from giving this middle-aged, innocent enough woman a free drink. This simple act of generosity and the assumption that this woman was harmless leads to a months-long vicious stalking from her. Although most violent crimes are perpetrated by men, women of course can be violent people too. 1 in 3 women will experience stalking at one point in their life, while 1 in 6 men will experience stalking. Men are more likely to be victims of violent crimes like murder and robbery, while women are more likely to be victims of sexual crimes. Like, well, you know, that crime. The light is rarely shown on male victims of sexual violence though, and with Donnie's story, we can safely conclude that you shouldn't trust anyone. Get rid of your friends, leave your family, and Get rid of your friends, leave your family, and hunker down in a bunker in northern Canada with 12 AR-15s. I am not condoning that, by the way. And I've never thought about doing that in my life. No, seriously. In reality, most reports of stalking are from previous intimate partners, which solidifies the fact that most people do not just get randomly assaulted or harassed by random people in the street. This does, of course, happen. I'm not denying the very real presence of danger when, say, a woman is walking at night, but a lot of violent and or sexual crimes against all genders are typically from people they already know. Martha is different, however. Martha, as we come to learn, has had a history of stalking and a history of rather, strange Facebook post where she claims that she represents notable people as a lawyer. This is just one of the signs that Martha is unwell, which may be a reason for her obsession with Donnie. Even after we see all of the horrific things that play out between Martha and Donnie, the viewer in some sense is still meant to feel bad for Martha. Now, it's not to say that everyone watching this show felt bad for Martha, since in a lot of people's eyes, she is a pretty irredeemable character. But leading up to her sentencing and even during her sentencing, we see how Donnie battles between feeling sympathy for Martha's apparent loneliness and feeling obviously harassed by her because of her extreme aggression and obsession that she's treated him with. As Donnie sits at a bar in the final episode listening to one of Martha's voicemails, we find out that Martha called him Baby Reindeer due to the resemblance to a childhood stuffed animal that she had, which she said was the only good thing about her childhood. Donnie, crying, feels some sort of connection to Martha and feels for her in that moment, despite all that she's done to him, because she obviously has some sort of childhood trauma. Just to put it out there, plenty of people go through terrible things, me included, and don't turn into serial stalkers, so not really an excuse, but a reason, right? In fact, Donnie's on and off girlfriend Terry repeatedly brings up the fact that Martha is mentally ill, but a mental illness is not an excuse for harassing and even assaulting someone, although it may be a reason, like I just said. After Donnie and Martha's first meet, oh my god, it feels like there's a popcorn kernel in my throat right now. After Donnie and Martha's first meeting, Martha begins to incessantly email Donnie, sending hundreds of emails a day, with Richard Gadd stating that the total amount of emails that he received from her was 41,000. During their encounters, we see Martha become increasingly more aggressive and volatile as the show goes on, switching moods like the flip of a switch, and at one point even, for lack of a better term, taking advantage of Donnie. I gotta keep it a little PG for the YouTube agent in my webcam right now. Sorry, hey, how's it going? Yep.
Lovely weather outside today, eh?
Jessica Gunning, the actress who plays Martha, did an absolutely phenomenal job with the role that she was given, I have to say. I am the acting expert. You guys know this. The stalking was at its worst when she managed to get my number. I stubbornly refused to change my number because I believed it was their responsibility to stop calling me. Then came the voicemails, and I listened to them in hope of expediting the case by finding something threatening. It was weird. I would go to meetings around town and listen to them on the way. The meeting would end, and I would put my headphones back in. I would go to bed at night and still hear the echoes of the voicemails. It was almost maddening hearing the voicemails bouncing around my eyelids. In episode 2, Donnie meets Terry, a trans woman who he matched with on a trans dating app. By the way, why does that exist? Seems like a good way to easily murder someone. Terry, played by a trans woman herself, is repeatedly attacked by Martha throughout the show, with the use of hate speech and even being physically assaulted by her after one of Donnie's stand-up sets, with Martha saying that Terry looks like a man. Donnie, too, is called gay slurs by Martha due to his romance with Terry and her assumption that he was taken advantage of by a man at one point in his life. Donnie, struggling with his sexuality and masculinity, treats Terry like shit. Not an excuse, but a reason. At one point, he even ditches her on the subway as she attempts to kiss him. Later in their relationship, Donnie is only able to get it up for Terry by picturing Martha. Like I said, Richard Gadd certainly did not make this show to turn himself into an angel. That's for sure. On top of this, Donnie lies about his real identity to Terry until later revealing it to her after she starts to catch on to his odd behavior. Donnie feels intense shame dating Terry, who's a trans woman, because of the way that he struggled with his sexuality and masculinity from being previously abused by a man in his life. And we see this so often with straight men who are dating trans women, with the fear of being perceived as gay or being perceived as this or that, which we know is not true. But unfortunately, the way that our society is brought up with masculinity and the way that society treats trans people, inevitably it happens a lot, and it's unfortunate that trans women have to go through these kinds of experiences. Donnie's coworkers certainly do not help matters either, repeatedly making offhand homophobic or sexist remarks to Donnie, leading Donnie to repress his abuse and sexuality even further. Not only that, but because his co-workers are unaware of Donnie's stalking, they make it worse by joking about Martha and Donnie getting it on together. I almost just did, that's not how they're doing it. Which Martha, being the stalker that she is, takes very seriously. Donnie does egg Martha on by joking with her without realizing that she's actually gonna take it seriously, but what I'm trying to say is that his co-workers just added flame to the fire. Or fuel to the fire. Fuel, right? Throw a thing of gasoline on that baby. Woo! Dante's Inferno, that shit, bruh. The shit with Donnie's coworkers gets so bad that when Donnie is assaulted by Martha in the middle of the bar, he is unable to go to the police because the owners were illegally not present in the bar when they needed to be. Martha's stalking gets progressively worse, with her camping out in front of Donnie's living space almost 24/7, putting his ex-girlfriend and her mom in danger. After his ex-girlfriend gets attacked by Martha outside her home, Donnie invalidates her feelings, leading up to him getting kicked out of this house. After this, Donnie is forced to move out and into his old classmate's apartment, who have turned into professional partiers during their gap year. Rich people, am I right? I mean, what I wouldn't do to just sit around all day, do drugs, and stare into the void as I question my existence. Oh wait, I already do that. Sober, which is a lot less fun. Living with the party animals that his roommates are, Donnie is reminded of a traumatic event that happened to him when he had first moved to London. Donnie, who is struggling through his comedy sets, if that's what you'd like to call it, finally gets the recognition he desires from a man who wrote one of Donnie's favorite TV shows. Darian, seeing that Donnie is vulnerable and isolated in his career, sees this as a great time to take advantage of Donnie. Smart. Unfortunately, this kind of abuse in the industry is all but too common. People who have even just a sliver of control in the industry will use it to their benefit to use and abuse those who are below them. During this episode, Donnie recounts how he took a shit ton of different drugs with Darian while trying to get into his good graces with a script that Donnie wrote for a show. I obviously am not going to be getting into the details, but on multiple occasions, Donnie would be coerced into taking a ton of drugs that would make him black out, leading to Darian taking advantage of Donnie multiple times while Donnie was asleep. These traumatic events led Donnie to start questioning his sexuality, and in response to being abused, he proceeded to have meaningless sex with people of every gender. Trauma can affect sexual desire in a myriad of ways. For some, it can cause both hypersexual and hyposexual behaviors. The ways that it impacts sexual desire are based on the person's response to the type of trauma experienced. There's no right or wrong way for someone to experience their trauma or to personalize it, but it can increase, decrease, or even sometimes eliminate sexual desire. Donnie, traumatized as he was unable to have sex with his girlfriend at the time, and as we see later in the show with Terry. Richard Gadd, in an interview with a Hollywood Reporter, said that this episode was the hardest for him to recreate on set. I really shouldn't use a British accent, it's too serious. I'll talk normally. It was really difficult going back there. I remember going to set for the diary days, the sexual assault days, and we sandwiched them together so it wasn't so spread out. I think it was the right thing to do, so that it would only be 2 or 3 days where we had to stay in the zone. On the way to set those days, I would be hoping for a major traffic jam or something so I could just have another beat to prepare and wrap my head around it to think. To play Donnie Dunn, I had to go back to that headspace where I was at the time in real life, which was very raw and damaged. I lost a lot of weight because I wanted to feel vulnerable and fragile in my body. I went from 96 kilograms to 68, so there was a bit of piercing myself back together when the filming process finished. Going back to that stuff is tough. After Donnie recollects his trauma, he decides to go to the police at this point in the show. A huge part of Baby Reindeer is Richard Gadd's experience with masculinity. He states multiple times that he felt that what happened to him didn't happen to men and that it made him less of a man, which is something that male victims deal with a lot. In fact, a male sex charity has seen a staggering 80% increase in the first-time callers since the release of Baby Reindeer, and that 53% of those referred cited Baby Reindeer as their reasoning for coming forward for support. The charity also saw a 40% increase in referrals from young people aged 26 to 35. As someone who was in middle school and then sought comfort in a relationship that immediately turned abusive and violent in high school, this show taught me a lot about myself and made me feel less alone. These events in my life were a decade ago, but I still question how and why I allowed myself to experience that trauma for so long. When he talks about how trauma makes you an open wound to be exploited by sick people, it's so true. Until I faced my trauma and figured out my sexuality, I just kept finding myself in compromising situations. I'm not sure I'm the only person related to that, and it was so powerful to see that representation. It's very personal to people like me who have been through abuse and are coping. It just really hits home, and it helped me feel like I'm not alone. Despite the way that brain-rotted TikTok users want to warp and twist the show, that is an undeniably positive impact. Richard Gadd's story, while resonating with many men who have felt left out in the conversation surrounding survivors of abuse, also resonated with many viewers who were women. I hated myself more than I loved her. That thread of insight unlocked something in me, and I felt a deep forgiveness for myself in relation to my own sexual trauma. I see myself in him. As a victim of DV and stalking, I could deeply understand him and his bad choices. It's a great series, and it shows how PTSD and traumas affect a person's actions, feelings, and self-esteem. I do understand why you would be conflicted, but as a completely regular-looking person of society that has done well with my career, etc., but has been plagued by sexual abuse as a child that I did not acknowledge for years, I completely understand the weird choices he made. It's extremely complicated and frustrating even looking at myself. Yes, during a very contentious point in the series, Donnie returns to his abuser's apartment. Many people have questioned this decision, but the reality is that we don't really understand his motivations. Trauma can change a person. That doesn't mean that you can't criticize their actions, it's just that no one will fully understand an individual's choices until you are literally in their shoes, which you are not. This is why I find the amount of victim blaming that people are doing to Richard Gadd's character to be deplorable. To me and many others, it seemed like Donnie needed some sort of closure after going through so many traumatic events by the hand of Darian. Once Donnie finally gets through to the police, we see how ridiculous the process is for getting justice for stalkers. In Edinburgh, Scotland, where Baby Reindeer takes place, harassment laws weren't introduced until 1997 before being amended in 2010 to more accurately reflect stalking's danger, validity, and to call it out by name. This was just 5 years before the real-life Martha started stalking Gad. This article goes on to talk about the importance of realistic portrayals of how awful stalking really is, and why shedding a light on people who do not fit the myth of the perfect victim is vital. You can be a victim and a bad person. You can be a victim and make questionable choices. Those statements are not mutually exclusive. Your victim status is not suddenly revoked because you were shitty to those around you like Donnie was. Donnie, after going to the police, is stunned by Martha's sudden silence, and seeing how Martha has continued to harass him and now even his parents with no repercussions, self-sabotages himself in a sense. Donnie ends up confronting Martha, saying that if she doesn't leave his family alone, they will never be together. Donnie then coerces Martha into sending him a threatening email. This conversation, and more as it turns out, have actually been recorded by Martha and turned into the police. Now the narrative was completely flipped, with Martha having the legal power over Donnie, and Donnie being regarded as just as much of a problem as Martha is by the police. At the end of episode 6, Donnie performs an improvised monologue on stage during one of his comedy sets, admitting to everything that he had done and revealing his trauma to the audience and the entire world. Not much of a comedic set anymore now, is it? As it turns out, someone had actually recorded Donnie's breakdown and uploaded it online for everyone to see. After this video goes viral, Donnie starts to gain notoriety, but he's still struggling through his past experiences. Obviously. Have you tried just getting over it? In the final episode, Donnie comes out to his parents, revealing his sexuality and his rape, stating how he feels as though he's less of a man because of it. After, male-identifying survivors of are particularly affected by the extra set of barriers that toxic masculinity presents. Because men are not always typically socialized to recognize themselves as being at risk of assault, when they are often triggers more feelings of shame, stigma, and weakness. This can mean that male survivors will take longer to disclose their assault or seek help, and will be left to deal with the trauma and fallout after assault on their own. That's patriarchy, baby. Just take anything, put baby after it, say it in Austin Powers' voice, and it's an instant catchphrase. Patriarchy, baby. In one of the best moments of the show, Donnie's father reveals to him that he grew up in the Catholic Church. I think you can see where this is going. I was sobbing on my knees during this scene. He's not alone, and he's not less of a man because of what happened to him. After leaving his parents and being wished good luck with the transition by his father, we love an ally, Donnie goes through the hundreds of voicemails left by Martha during his stay with his parents. Upon finding one where Martha physically threatened Donnie's parents, Donnie was finally able to get Martha convicted on multiple counts of harassment. During the courtroom scene, Martha and Donnie share a final glance, realizing that neither of them will have each other in the twisted way that they have once relied on each other. Even after all of this, the audience, perhaps, can still feel a bit of sympathy for Martha. In the final scene of the show, Donnie is offered a free drink at a bar, similar to how he first met Martha. This was, to a lot of people, a bit on the nose, with the message being that Donnie has every tool at his disposal to perpetuate a cycle of abuse, although it's up to him to break it. So that's the very long summary of the show. Obviously, as you can tell, I did really like it. Despite it being hard to watch and at times frustrating, it tells a really good personal narrative about how abuse can affect people, particularly male victims. With all that being said, finally we can get into the fun part of the video. Dumb people. One might say that I am also that. Everything that is good, mediocre, or bad will eventually be ruined by the internet. This is why I enjoy things in isolation. I don't need to know what people are saying about my favorite Slipknot album, because I will cry if they say that they hate it. When I watched Baby Reindeer, I was captivated by it and emotionally swayed, ultimately rating it a 10 out of 10 in my personal burn book. However, I came to find out that some people online really just didn't get it. I know that media literacy is such a buzzword, but the lack of it that people have is palpable in this situation. Literally, media literacy is the ability to critically analyze stories presented in the mass media and to determine their accuracy or credibility. And boy, oh boy, were people unable to fucking critically analyze the show. Sorry, Baby Reindeer is pissing me off. This guy's so stupid. Like, the main dude should have blocked her from the beginning. He should have pushed her in the river. He is so dumb. I know you're probably all thinking this has to be rage bait, but nope, it isn't. It's a Twitter user. When have they ever not been serious? The funny thing to me about these kind of arguments for the show is that the entire point of the show was to display that he was a shitty person and that he did make bad decisions, that he is not a perfect victim. That is not victim blaming, but tweets like this are. And so is this TikTok.
That guy in Baby Reindeer, I know that's a real story, but he is not a victim, regardless of what has happened to him before the Baby Reindeer incident. Okay? He looked at that woman and he saw somebody to pity. He says it within his narration. I've noticed that the details of her life, and I'm paraphrasing, did not match her actions. I noticed that she would talk about going places, but why is she here all the time? When you see that somebody's trying to make intimate, romantic advances at you, you say no. You make it clear, no, I'm not interested. I have somebody else. His ego was being fed. His ego was being brushed by that because he felt like she was lower than him. He pitied her. So he is not a victim. I don't care what happened to him. It doesn't matter what happened to him. You be clear with people and you tell them no.
Yes, because making bad decisions and leading someone on should lead you to getting stalked and harassed and even assaulted by them.
Why are we still here?
Yeah, I find it interesting that a woman would have this perspective since women are consistently attacked and even murdered for saying no to men. No does not mean that someone will walk away and say, okay, have a nice day. Have you heard of These subjects are just not that simple and should be watered down in a 60-second ranty TikTok by this person. At first, everyone at the pub thought it was funny that I had an admirer, Gad said in an interview with the UK's The Times. Then she started to invade my life, following me, turning up at my gigs, waiting for me outside my house, sending thousands of voicemails and emails.
When it comes to the Baby Reindeer thing, y'all are calling him a victim because all you see is a fat girl who he was giving some play to, and she should have known that he wasn't going to be her man. She should have known that he wasn't really serious. He was just play flirting and that he would never want her. That's what you're suggesting. That's what you say within the context of he was a victim. You don't become a victim of stalking if you never tell a person to back off. He never rejected any of her advances. Y'all expect a big woman, her, in the story, to assume, oh, okay, that's a skinnier, attractive-looking fella. Ooh, that grungy, low voice. She should have known that he wasn't serious, that he was just play flirting. She should have known. No, she thought, a lot of y'all got your husbands this way, that chasing him down would get him because he never made it clear that his answer was no.
I can't. It has to be rage bait. Yes, he led her on, and it was wrong. But Donnie made it clear to Martha multiple times that what she was doing was not okay. And still, she continued to stalk and harass him. Did you even watch the show? Donnie was a fucking asshole to Martha. That's without a doubt, yes. But that doesn't mean that what she did was justified or okay. This kind of idiocy is truly on display in a Spiked article that I read about the show. By the way, who's reading Spiked articles? Sorry, this is just my own pettiness coming through, but has anyone ever said to you, oh yeah, I read the Spiked article the other day? Unless you're a high court judge or have been living under a rock, you'll have heard of the why did I just start talking in reverse right then? Unless you're a high court judge or have been living under a rock, you'll have heard by now of Baby Reindeer, the deceptively inoffensive sounding Netflix smash hit show. Written and performed by comedian Richard Gad. It struck me as an extremely well-written and well-acted drama, but one sense that Gad, having chased fame for so long, wasn't ready to settle for just having a hit show. No, Gad had to make this a bid for the tip-top podium of the Victimhood Olympics in caps, hence the "This is a true story" strap, hoisting up its skirts and sticking its thumb out at the start of episode 1. I'm also struck that it's not Gad's alleged male apparently someone big in the TV industry, who's the main villain of the show, who has been catching the most flack in real life. Instead, it has been the obviously powerless woman, Fiona Harvey, the inspiration for stalker Martha Scott. Allegedly, there are shades of Sayville, the tally world protecting the talent, mixed with good old-fashioned misogyny here. Okay, let's take this bit by bit. Was Richard Gad attempting to win the Victimhood Olympics by putting "This is a true story" at the beginning? Well, I think we can criticize that choice without being such a ass about it, like I did. I've already argued my point about why I don't think he was trying to do this anyway, so I'm moving on. As for the second half, I do completely agree that Richard Gad's framing of the show was obviously way less centered around his versus the stalking that he faced. In my opinion, I think that Martha's stalking was such a focal point because it showed how much of an ass he became due to the trauma that he went through. To call Martha a powerless woman, however, is absurd and only perpetuating the idea that women cannot be abusers. There is certainly an argument to be made that female stalkers, or villains in general within media that are women, are often written in a way that leaves audiences more apt to laugh at them. Unfortunately, if your main villain is a marginalized person of any sort, they will face hate online for their intrinsic traits. So I don't think it's without reason to say that people online have been extremely misogynistic to Martha or fat-shamey. But I don't see how Richard Gadd framed his story to be misogynistic in any way. Again, at multiple points, unless you're a red-pilled alpha male watching, you will most likely feel some sort of sympathy towards Martha, similar to how Donnie felt towards her. Another issue related to misogyny is how multiple people have made the critique that people wouldn't have been as interested in a story if the roles were switched. While I can kind of understand this argument, I think that if the roles were switched, arguments are largely reductive due to their nature of creating an us versus them sort of mentality. I also think the show might have gotten way less traction. People love seeing female offenders because they love the distraction from the ugly truth that an overwhelming amount of offenders unfortunately just are men. People tend to trivialize violence against women because they think, for us, it's just another day. When a man gets raped or stalked, he is ashamed, emasculated, and he feels a loss of dignity. For women, being raped or stalked is supposedly easier because that's just what happens to us as women. We don't have a dignity to lose, we don't have shame. For us, we have to almost expect it. We're the gender that gets violated, and that's what it is. Women are stalked more often, with people ultimately coming to the conclusion that it's just part of being a woman. But to fix this system, we shouldn't put down male victim stories, since they are also very powerful, relatable, and important for so many people regardless of gender. On top of this, Donnie confronts his toxic masculinity throughout the show, and confronting and examining this issue is one of the biggest ways that we can hope to combat male violence towards women. The press around Baby Reindeer became even more of a spectacle when true crime junkies couldn't contain their load and decided to squirt it all over the legacy of the show. Of course, even though Richard Gadd changed everyone's names and advocated for the show to exist as a fiction, he did say that it was true, and this is the internet. So after seeing the horrors inflicted by both Darian and Martha on Donnie, people took it to themselves to become the police. Hey, at least TikTokers would probably do a better job. Nobody is denying that Gadd experienced something terrible, but nor can we deny his position of power in this aftermath. He who can tell the most compelling story gets to control the narrative. He gets to be the hero and the victim and the omniscient narrator telling you who's who. He gets to write the TV show with the title card saying, "This is a true story," which swiftly becomes synonymous in the public consciousness with "this story is the truth." An investigation was recently opened when people wrongfully accused Sean Foley as being the real-life Darian. Sean Foley made a post on Twitter saying that he contacted the police over defamatory comments made about him due to the show. Gadd himself tried to shut down the speculation against Foley, writing on Instagram, "People I love, have worked with, and admire, including Sean Foley, are unfairly getting caught up in speculation. Please don't speculate on any of who the real people, Please do speculate on who any of the real people could be. That's not the point of our show." The worst of it was yet to come though, with the alleged real-life Martha doing an interview with Piers fucking Morgan. You know you've made it when you get on Piers Morgan's show. Now, there was a lot in this nearly hour-long interview. Add uncut to the title of his show too, because Jesus fucking Christ. I'm just going to note a few important points from the interview, but I'll link it down below for you all to watch in full if you so wish. Now, the alleged real Martha is named Fiona Harvey, and just to clarify, no matter what, no one should be harassed because of a TV show. I think it's wrong, whether you believe what she's been accused of or not, that people sleuthed in order to find her. To be fair though, it wasn't that hard for people to find her since they easily found her social media based off of what was shown in the show. Fiona states that she went on Piers Morgan to tell her side of the story. At the beginning of the interview, she claims that she never watched any of the show and that the entire show is a work of fiction, going on to attempt to disprove nearly everything that was in the show, including contacting his family, acquiring his phone number, and Richard Gadd watching her through the window in her house. Now, I don't want to get sued because this woman is on a suing rampage, but in my opinion, and in my personal view that is not fact, she changed her story at least 30 fucking times during this interview, filled with a whole lot of backpedaling. The main takeaway from this interview is that Martha is playing a huge lawsuit against Netflix, the Daily Mail, and apparently anyone who is lying about her. "I am not a convicted stalker," Harvey said in her statement. "I have never been charged with any crime, let alone been convicted, still less pleaded guilty, and of course, I have never gone to prison for anything. This is how Gadd and Netflix chose to portray me in a TV show for their own financial gain." Oh, fuck, I should have read it in the... "I am not a convicted stalker." That was pretty good, actually. Following this, recently Fiona Harvey has actually moved forward with the lawsuit, demanding $170 million in damages. I'm sure she could prove that she got harassed based on the show, but can she prove what they said was false? Who knows? Only time will tell. The suit was filed Thursday in the U.S. District Court for the Central District of California. Harvey's lawsuit alleges that Netflix told brutal lies about her in the Baby Reindeer series. The lies that the defendants told about Harvey to over 50 million people worldwide include that Harvey is a twice convicted stalker who was sentenced to 5 years in prison, and that Harvey Gad, her complaint says. Defendants told these lies and never stopped because it was a better story than the truth, and better stories made money. In response to this, Netflix said, "We intend to defend this matter vigorously and to stand by Richard Gad's right to tell his story." Hey, the next thing we need is for the trial to be televised and live streamed so that Asmund Gold can make a 30-part reaction series from it. I'll be getting my popcorn ready. And that AdSense, baby. Besides all of the hellish media reporting surrounding the show, let's end on a positive note. Edits. The bane of my fucking existence! Why do people take shows based on real events, sorry, don't want to get sued, or even worse, real people? Like Gypsy Rose is allegedly a real person now. No, real people like Gypsy Rose, and turn these seriously fucked up situations into edits, like all of the time. Is this like the internet's way of coping with things? It's just so bizarre. Like if I publicly went through something traumatic tomorrow and dozens of people started making edits about it, I'd probably lose it. I don't know. I bring up these every time I make a video about true crime. I genuinely don't know what someone's thought process could be to take a reenactment of a man getting stalked, allegedly, and turn it into a viral edit with like fucking ecstasy, super slowed, playing in the background. But hey, that's just the internet. An internet theory, right?
Hey guys, making this video to talk about something really serious that just recently happened. Beginning of this year, my dog almost died. And it's been really, really hard. Okay, what the fuck?
While I personally enjoyed Baby Reindeer, the internet can ruin anything. No, seriously, I can understand why someone wouldn't like the show and where the obvious criticisms come from. Richard Gad doesn't portray himself to be perfect, and the fallout surrounding the show has only confirmed that. Next time I like something, I'll make sure I pull a Jeff Bezos and shoot myself up into the moon in order to enjoy it while the internet's short attention span plays out. Oh wait, I can't do that because I'm not rich. Well, you know, I guess the next thing to do is write a book about my complex trauma. Alright guys, that's it for me and that's it for this video. I know this video was a bit more serious, but I tried to make it light and fun and funny at times where it's okay to be light and funny, so I hope you got a laugh out of this video. Let me know if you watched the show what you thought of it. Let me know what you think about the real Martha going on Piers Morgan. Let me know what you think about the accusations of misogyny and the criticisms surrounding the show and Richard Gad in general. I'd love to hear your thoughts. If you like this video, you can give it a thumbs up. If you like me, you can subscribe. I post comedy and commentary videos, so if that sounds like your thing, make sure to subscribe and turn the notification bell so you know when I post a video. If you want more of me and you want to see some exclusive content, I do have a Patreon. So if you'd like to go become a member on there, go check that out. See if any of the tiers interest you. That is the best way you can directly support me. So I really, really appreciate it if you wish to do that. Anyway, yeah, I really, really hope you all enjoyed this video, but I mean, more importantly than that, I hope I see you in the next video, right? You better be watching my next video intently, okay? Right? You're gonna be there, right? Alright, I hope so. Okay, peace. I don't ever slow up, no I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up and make a statement. I don't ever slow up, no I don't take shit.